Amen. Okay, so we're going to be looking at chapters 3 to 5. And in chapter 3, it's an extension. Chapter 2, there was a lot of exaltation of humanity. And this is going to continue into chapter 3, but we'll have a lot of graphic illustrations. And that's interesting about Isaiah. He does that. He will say it, make a point, and then he'll give you illustrations. And it's poetically done, so the illustrations are really very graphic a lot of times. We saw, let's see, why did I do this one here? Let's see. This is Isaiah 2. Okay, yeah, just the idea of what like man exalts man. He puts him before the Creator, and that's what he's really rebuking them a lot in these first 2 chapters. And like verse 9, it says, so man is humble, and each one is brought low, and God says, do not forgive them for doing this. And then he says here, the haughty looks of man shall be brought low, and the lofty pride of men shall be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up, it shall be brought low. And then finally, at the end of the chapter, he says, stop. I know God is pretty blunt in Isaiah here, but he says, stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath. Of what account is he? And so now we're going to see some illustrations in chapter 3 of what illustrating this thing. Then we go to chapter 4, and this will be it's a short chapter. I think it's 6 verses. And this thing I call interchange. You see rebuke, and then all of a sudden, here's this total turnaround of hope. You know, God gives us hope. And that's what we do here. We see from 3 to 4, 2 to 3 is rebuke. And then chapter 4, it's a chapter that's just all hope, you know. But what it is talking to us. And it'll say in the latter days, you know, that's in the days of Messiah. It's looking at, but also he's talking to his people too, but it also refers to us. And then chapter 5, we will go back. You know, we have that great chapter 4, it talks about the condition of the people that will be in his kingdom. And then you go back to reality in chapter 5 with some more illustrations. And that hopefully we'll get all through that. Let's see. I'll catch up here on the sides. Okay. Now, would anybody like to volunteer to do the time periods of Isaiah? Does anybody remember those? You want to give it a shot. There's 3 time periods in Isaiah. Johnny, you want to give it a whirl? Okay.
39 is Isaiah's life. 40 through 55 is Babylonian captivity. And then 56 through 66 is the return.
That's excellent, Johnny. Very good. We'll commiserate you at the end of the class here. We'll take care of you. Thank you. That's really good. Let's see. Now you made me have to catch up with this. All right. And then, can anybody volunteer? Who are the contemporary prophets? Ken. Very good. And Hosea. Yep. Amos. Very good. Those are the 3 prophets. And as you can see, Isaiah, does anybody remember Isaiah's time that was up there? He started in roughly 740 and could have ended 690, 680, you know, we don't know, but somewhere around there. He probably got into Manasseh's time, and that was after Hezekiah. But as you can see, these prophets were contemporary with him. Micah was considered, what was he considered? Southern. He was from southern Judah, and he was considered the rural prophet. And he was right at the same time, you know, roughly the same time as Isaiah. And Isaiah was considered the city prophet. That's what it looks like anyway. And then Hosea, who did he prophesy to? Yeah, don't look at the board. Israel, yeah. And that was, let's see, I go back there. And then Amos, of course, was to Israel also, but he was a little bit before them. All right, so key themes in Isaiah. Does anybody remember what the key themes are? Very good, yeah, for hope through judgment. And then, but I've changed it a little bit, so you probably won't be able to guess it. Servanthood and kingdom are big themes in there. And like I said, Isaiah is like a symphony. And you see these themes come and go, come and go. It's just beautifully done. It's just amazing how it's realized. You see trust and rebellion. You see that trust is a big one. From chapters 7 to 39 is a discourse on trust. It's all about trust. Don't trust the nations and trusting God and such. But they didn't do that. And then what you're going to see is a lot of arrogance and humiliation that happens to these people. Let's see, I better catch up. Let's see. Judgment, yeah, see. You remember what it said about servant? How many? It occurs 36 times in Isaiah. Remember what it said about that? Servant occurs 36 times. It only occurs 6 times in 1 to 39, but it occurs 30 times in 40 to 66. But you read, even though it only occurs 6 times, you read it through the lens of servanthood. You'll see that once we get to 40 to 66, that's what 1 to 39 is really all about. The servant that trusts, the servant that, but it's just not said as much in that. Let's see. Now, the outline of that, can anybody volunteer to do this? Anybody remember how it's laid out? Is there a brave volunteer? You'll get 300 points if you can do this.
1 through 6 is problems and solutions.
Man, Jennifer, that's awesome. The problem of servanthood and the solution. 1 to 5 is the problem, and then chapter 6 is the solution. Okay, 7 to 39. Anybody remember what that's about? Trust. There you go. Yeah, trust. Will you trust God? Will you give your life to Him, believing that you can? And that's the emphasis. Is God wants us to our complete trust in Him. That's what He's looking for, and that'll be laid out very clearly. And then 40 to 55.
Grace.
What was it?
Grace.
Grace. All right. Yeah. Very good. Grace. And see, we learn to trust Him, but what is going to motivate us then to really trust Him? And that's grace, and that's what He did through Jesus to give us that motivation to really go the extra step. All right. And then 56 to 66. Yes, character of servant. The servant who is called must demonstrate righteous character. And we'll look at a definition of righteousness and justice later on as we go. But okay, so then we saw, in just a quick review here, Isaiah 1, we saw a sinful nation, this, people laden with iniquity. God lays it out very, very clearly. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. The Holy One of Israel is a term in there that will occur mostly in Isaiah. I think it's like 42 times in the whole Old Testament, 26 times in Isaiah, 13 and 13 in each half. He is, and I think that it's getting at, he is the only being worthy of worship. I think it's getting at that idea. But his people are utterly estranged. He says, goes on to say, so they're rebuked. So what do? They respond to that by we'll give more sacrifices, because that's how their idolatrous thinking was. You offer more sacrifices, God, maybe you'll get what you want. But he says, what to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. And for us to think, the application to us too, I've had enough of burnt offerings of rams. That's what they were supposed to do. But he had enough of them, and he did not delight in the blood of bulls and lambs. And when you appear before me, who has required of you this trampling of my courts? Come before the Lord with reverence and fear. But if he wanted offerings, why did he tell him not to do them here? Oops, excuse me. Oh, this stand is going to have problems. Okay. Yes. It is something he wants us to do, or wanted them to do and stuff, but the heart is the most important thing. And then when you offer the sacrifice, it's meaningful. It means something. It's good for you, and God is pleased by that. But that's the problem. Let me catch up here. Oh, outline of Isaiah, we did that. Okay. Yeah. And this is sad. Like at the end of the chapter, it says, how the faithful city has become a whore. She who was full of justice, righteousness lodging her. Sad. It's just what was the reason God chose these people? What was his purpose for them? Rodney?
I think they would be whole and righteous as a shining light, I guess,
That was the only, it's amazing that God does that, that he uses people as a vehicle, to show his glory, show his great. He wanted them to show the world who he is, to show, this is how you live, But they failed miserably in that. And to, go to our day, that's what we are. Because of the grace that we've received, it gives us more ability to be the kind of people that he wants to be. And that's what this book is all about. All right, so, and then we saw this here. I just wanted to touch on this real quick. We saw this judgment in chapter 1. In chapter 2, you see this change of pace. It goes from judgment to hope here. And this is what you call the mission statement of the church, the mission statement of God's people here. Jordan, would you mind reading that? Okay.
What did Isaiah, the son of Amos, son of Judah, Jerusalem? It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. And many people shall come and say, Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord.
That was his purpose. That's what he wanted them to do. That's what it is. And I highlighted that word law. And does anybody know what the word law, what the Hebrew word for it is? Instruction. I think, Torah, to come and learn God's Torah. And law sometimes has a negative connotation to it. But really, in the Hebrew, it's meant to be instruction. And it's like, for instance, if I said, well, Darlene likes to drive 120 miles an hour. But she doesn't do that because the law restricts her. Does that mean the law says she can't do that? But the law is there for her protection, for her safety, and things like that. And the same thing with God's law is. I think there's an idea of it that He walks alongside you with it. That instruction. It's like that you're going to have the most benefit in life. You're going to live the best life if you live by His law. That's your best opportunity to have fulfillment in this life, is following His law. And He gives that to us. All right, I give up on that. I'll have to buy another stand. But He gives that to us so that we can have the most fulfillment in life. But they rejected that from Him. And you'll see in verse 2 there, it says, it shall come to pass in the latter days. Does everybody know what latter days refers to? Rodney, you probably preached a bunch of sermons on that, I bet.
It literally, I think, means the days after this, but it's the idea of the days that were being prophesied, the coming of the Messiah, those days that would come about when these things would be fulfilled in the Old Testament long past.
Yeah, you see, what is it in Acts? Doesn't say this is what Joel was talking about in the latter days, okay? And also you say in that day. You'll see that a lot. Most of the time, it's referring to the days of the Messiah too. Sometimes it has other meanings to it. But also we saw in this passage like I say, the mission statement of what these people would be like. And we saw that they're going there voluntarily. Let us go to this mountain. Let us learn God's law. Let us bring, and spread that word. That's the characteristics of the kind of people that will be in this. So I'm talking about, anybody have any comments or anything like that? We're about to get started in the text. I was trying to limit the amount of time I did review on stuff. But, okay, so we'll start in chapter 3. And what I say, these are illustrations here of what God is going to do and of them exalting themselves and making man the primary thing. And I'll just read it so it's not so I can get through it quicker. But so verse 3, what have we got? Verse 3 to 4, or 1 to 4. What we're going to see is what happens when man does that is its social collapse, its societal decline, and it will be very much illustrated in this chapter. So starting verse 1, it says, "Behold, the Lord God of hosts." And by the way, that word is mentioned, I think, in the Bible around, I read anywhere from 200 to 285 times. And does anybody know what that means? What that's the Lord of hosts? Anybody ever heard? It's used 62 times in Isaiah. But
Isn't it like the Lord of armies?
Yeah, the Lord of armies. I mean, he's of the heavenly armies, of all armies, God is the Lord of hosts, the supreme commander. But anyway, the Lord of hosts is taking away from Jerusalem and Judah support and supply. All support of bread, all support of water, the mighty man and the soldier, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor and the skillful magician and the expert in charms. And I will make boys their princes, and infants shall rule over them. What do you get out of that? What do you see is going to happen here? Because of their behavior, because of they've rebelled against God, what is going to happen? And this applies then, applies now. This is who God is. This is how it works. What do you see?
I'm going to take everything away.
Everything, yeah. And what we'll be getting at in this too is that I talked about the Assyrians. That will be one of the things. They'll be attacked by Israel and Syria. They're gonna really hurt them. But these are it's reflected in these verses of what's going to happen to them in their time. Rodney, go ahead.
Yeah, he's taking everything they trust in away.
Very good.
And the fourth verse shows that the very ones they would not trust in, and boys, rather than men, now become infants,
Yeah.
become their ruler. It's flipped upside down.
Yeah, and there's also a thought of that too, of like they become so infantile and they're ruling, that they're the kind of people. So I could see it go either way on that, but it's just it's upside down. Society is upside down. And what happens here is the idea through this is the more humans exalt themselves, they humiliate themselves is what happens. So that's what he's trying to get at here. Any other comments or questions about this? All right. Next, let's see. Okay, and we got verses 5 to 7, and it says, and the people will oppress one another. Everyone is fellow, everyone is neighbor, and the youth will be insolent to the elder, and the despised to the honorable. For a man will take hold of his brother in the house of his father, saying, you have a cloak, you shall be our leader, and this heap of ruins shall be your rule. And in that day he will speak out, saying, I will not be a healer. In my house there is neither bread nor cloak. You shall not make me a leader of the people. And so what do you see happening here? Danny, what do you think?
I just kind of see a picture when you reject God, you're not going to find the kind of things you're looking for. You're not going to find leadership or resources or all these kind of things. You can look for it in other people. It's not going to be there.
Yeah. It's desperate times come. It just goes from bad to worse, and that's what it's going to happen to them. So, all right, go to the next thing here. And then it goes on to talk about, from 8 to 11. And it says, for Jerusalem has stumbled, and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying his glorious presence. For the look on their faces bears witness against them. They proclaim their sin like Sodom. They do not hide it. Woe to them, for they have brought evil upon themselves. Tell the righteous, and this is a great verse here. Tell the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their deeds. And all through the book, we see there's always a remnant. There's always going to be a people that will be faithful to him, and they're going to be saved. But woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with them. Is there any benefit then in not serving God and not following his law in a sense? This is what you get. This is what happens. And we can see it even, a lot of these things, you'll see, this is our society. This is today. You're going to see a lot of these things, especially when we get into chapter 3. It's like, man, nothing has changed. Okay. Then 12 to 15 here, this, the Lord has, let's see, 12. Okay, my people, infants are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, your guides mislead you. They have swallowed up the course of your paths. The Lord has taken his place to contend. He stands to judge the peoples. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders and princes of his people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your houses. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor, declares the Lord of hosts. So he's on the leaders here. There's a lot of responsibility that he's putting on them, and he's rebuking them severely. But anything else that you see in this? I'm getting to other things that I'm going to try and get through this quickly as I can, but there's other things I want to spend more time on. Anything else you see in this that strikes you?
They've ruined God's kingdom for their own selfish.
Yeah, yeah. It's sad, because what it's meant to be. They had the opportunity to be the light, to have a wonderful, wonderful place, and you'll see that expressed. But go ahead, Rodney.
Well, and their leaders, again, it's upside down. Rather than the leaders working for the good of the people, the leaders are crushing the people. They're devouring the people. And
Yeah.
it's a very opposite of what they should be.
Absolutely. And we're going to see that illustrated as we get on. You'll see this very thing illustrated in there. Okay. Then this is the last few verses. No, we got 26 in this. So 16 and 17. This is an interesting one here. The Lord said, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with outstretched necks, glancing wantonly with their eyes, mincing as they go, tinkling with their feet, therefore the Lord will strike with a scab the heads of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will bear their secret parts. Now, do you think he's referring to individual women? What do you think he's referring to here? What do you think, Art?
The picture I get through this entire chapter is he's really picking on the upper crust, if you will, the
Right.
leaders and the rich and all. He goes, you keep the poors, all the poor people that own things, you keep it in your house. And then he's going to go on and describe these ladies and be like, you've got the scarves and all the jewelry and all the things that make you so important, and I'm going to take all that away. It seems like it's more in that direction.
Yes. One thing that, I think it's probably both. But I think as we read down, you'll see at the end of this chapter, there's an indication there that was talking about the city, because he said, and her gates shall lament and mourn. But I think it's both, because they were in a time, as I talked about before, of immense wealth. I mean, they had the Syrians were subdued at that time, and both northern Israel and southern Israel were flourishing. And Uzziah was a really good leader, and he brought a lot of wealth to the country and built things, and had skillful men that built war machines. I mean, they were very powerful in that time. They had a standing army that was very powerful. So things were very well with them. And so what happens in times of prosperity? People get, they lose their focus and things like that. And but it's a good chance it could be both. But possibly the context is that it's the city, the city as a whole. They just thought they were something that they weren't, and I know you see this today too, that this is how a lot of if you apply it to individuals, you see a lot of women and things like that. This is a very common thing. Nothing has changed. They like to show off. They like to get that attention and things like that. It's like these people here. All right. Any comments about this? Let's go on. Okay. And what's sad about this? Let's see, 16. Let's see. Let me get to the next one. See, the Lord had in mind a beautiful city. He pictured her as a beautiful bride or whatever. But this is what happens, and I'll quit reading. Jason, do you mind reading? Do you mind reading this? Okay.
And that day the Lord will take away the finery of the anklets, the headbands, and the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets, and the scarves, the headdresses, the armlets, the sashes, the perfume boxes, and the amulets, the signet rings and nose rings, the festal robes, the mantles, the cloaks, and handbags, the mirrors, the linen garments, the turbans, and the veils. Instead of perfume, there will be rottenness, and instead of a belt, a rope, and instead of set hair, baldness. Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in battle. And her gates shall lament and mourn. Empty, she shall sit and drink.
See, nothing's changed. There's sunglasses, there's purses, all this stuff. It's the same kind of idea, that of what we look to make us happy. But in the end, it's not that it's bad to have those things, but when those are your life, and that's what you want to make you happy, it's a different story. And that's a sad verse at 24, and It's poetic language that Isaiah put in there. Instead of perfume, there should be rottenness, you know, and instead of a belt, a rope. We're just fooled by sin that there's actually some kind of benefit in it and things like that. And it's just very sad in those days. And this is one of the amazing paradoxes in the scriptures, is that it's the opposite of this that really gains you something in life. When we admit that we are not the ultimate, you know, when we admit there's something greater than this, that's when we're really flourish, and that's when we're really going to be content, and we're really going to have some success. But you know, you make yourself ultimate, and you know, you'll eventually fall into the dust. It never works. All right. So then it's a bad chapter break, so I put that up here. This should be in chapter 3. And what do you think of this scripture here? It says, "And 7 women shall take hold of 1 man in that day," and that's what I think it's talking about then. Saying, "We will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by your name. Take away our reproach." What do you think would motivate them to say something like this? If they were attacked, if they were, you know, men killed and things like that, that's what we're thinking, Rodney?
Yeah, I was going to say that their husbands have been killed.
Yes.
In battle.
Men have been killed, and so and women are just kind of desperate. You know, for them it was a big thing to have a husband and to have children and things like that, and they're so desperate. We'll eat our own bread, we'll make our own clothes. Only let us be called by our name. Take away our reproach. You know, is this indicating the desperation of the times that comes to them because of their sin? Any comments, questions? No, they're breathing diaphragmatically here now. All right. Now we come to chapter 4, and this is that break. This is we see that judgment. Now we see the hope again of what it is and what we're looking to us and looking to what God can do. And when you read this, the problem that you see is, okay, people read this and they say, well, how is God ever going to make this people? And when you look at us, how is God ever going to make us the kind of people that he wants us to be here, you know? And that's what this book is all about. How is God going to do that? And like chapter 2 and this here put here, so that we see how the focus of the book goes, you know? God is going to make he's going to show how he's going to make us those kind of people. And so, anyway, I'll just read it real quick. "In that day, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and honor of the survivors of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and by a spirit of burning." Now, what do you think he means by that? You've seen that kind of language before. Anybody else, have you ever seen that language? He will wash away the filth? Yes.
It's like this refinement where there's been a judgment, what comes out is something pure.
Yes. Ezekiel, you know, I will wash them, you know, and that's the idea. God is going to do something to cleanse us from this, and he's going to do it by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of burning. And it has to be, there has to be, like these people have to be judged. Because remember what I said, God is a God of cause and effect. There's just laws in this universe that can't be broken. So we sin, there's a penalty, there's a price. It just, and these people, they sin, and they're gonna pay for that. But as I said, the statement that I've stolen from somebody else, judgment is never the last word with God. You'll see that, because you see this here, he's gonna do something. Even though he's gonna judge us and judge them, that's not the last word, because he has a plan. He has a way to bring us back to him. That's what he can do. Art?
This reminded me too of the words of John when he says, "There's one coming who will baptize you with Holy Spirit and with fire." You've got that idea.
Yeah, very good. Very
The
good.
word and then the burning, and so but it was all there. The whole purpose of it was to get them back. It wasn't there just to express
Destroy. Yeah. Never his intent. Never what he wants to do. And that was the scriptures use a lot of play on words. And this word spirit is has several meanings to it. It's the Hebrew word, it's like ruah, and it can mean wind, breath, Holy Spirit, Spirit of man, and it just depends on context of what it is. And what we see here, it's like, I think they said it could be translated wind of judgment and a wind of burning. Like there's gonna be a cleansing that's gonna take place, but it's sort of burning. And like Art said, that's an appropriate verse to point out. You know, he shall baptize you with fire. Yes. Anyway, so that's an interesting verse to have in here, that there's still hope for the future of what's going to happen. In verse 5, it says, "Then the Lord will create over the whole mountain of Zion, and over her assemblies, a cloud by day, and smoke," I don't do that very good, "and a shining and flaming fire by night. For over all the glory, there will be a canopy. And there will be a booth by shade from day from the heat, and a refuge from a shelter from the storm and rain." Anything pop up there? What kind of light? Danny, I know you see it. Yeah.
It's interesting, like just the whole picture, right? There's going to be something, we kind of condense it down, there's going to be something beautiful that happens.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out of our final judgment, and God's going to be leading his people, and there's going to be a type of shelter
Yeah.
that creates, with that.
Yep, there's an Exodus. See that Exodus picture in there too? There's going to be an Exodus. This is a new Exodus here that's going to happen. A flaming fire by night and a cloud over the glory by day. You know, and then that canopy, that's like a wedding canopy, you know, and he wants to make it just a wonderful thing, or a booth for shade under God's protection. God wants to bless us so much in that, but again, he brings up these Exodus pictures and stuff like that of the new Exodus and that. All right. Let's see. Now, here we are. We're back to reality. Now we have another set of illustrations of what his people are like and what they're doing. And let's see. He says, "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard." Now, he's going to tell them a story. And people like stories. And so you can imagine, I don't know how Isaiah, Rodney, what were you going to say?
Well, you can imagine when you read the first line, you think, all right, this is going to,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Yeah. It's like, it reminds me a lot remember when Nathan went to David, after David sinned with Bathsheba. This is a similar story, or along the same way that he sets him up with it. So he has this, pretend there's a group of people there. He's saying this to them, and he says, "My beloved," listen to the story. He says, "My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed it out with a wine vat in it. And he looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard." Says, "What more was there for me to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it?" You know, when I looked to yield wild grapes, why did it to yield grapes? Why did it yield wild grapes? And if these people are listening, they say, "Well, plow it under, you know, start again, you know, and destroy that field, you know," because they say in Jerusalem or in Israel, it took like 3 years to get this to that point. They had to get all the rocks out of the field, and then they had to plant. The next year, it took a year, they say, to get it out of a field, and then they had to plant it, and then the third year, then they'd have a crop. And so all this work was done. So these people look at it and go, "Yeah, that's worthless, you know, get rid of it." There's a story told of a guy that took his dad, who was a farmer from Ohio, over to Israel. And as they're driving around, his dad was just looking out the window, kind of like, "Man, I can't believe this." And he said, "What's the problem, Dad?" And he said, "I cannot believe people would fight over this pile of rocks." And that is true. Israel is a lot like Southern California, where I grew up. And years ago, I was in the beekeeping business, and we used to go through the hills there in Southern California to mind all the bees. And there was a lot of avocado, just for miles and miles, avocado trees, orange groves, things like that. And they were on these steep hills, rocky and difficult terrain, but they were very successful. And it was prodigious production. And the guy I worked with said that they got that technology from Israel. because they figured out how to make grow things in rocky soil, and that was pretty interesting, so that meant a lot to them. All right, so then he says, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured, and I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and briars and thorns shall grow up. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And he looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed, for righteousness, but behold, an outcry. So you are the guilty ones, Israel. So that just hit them very hard. Now, there's two words used here for righteousness and justice. Okay, and they're used in pairs like that. They can be synonymous, but they have a little nuances of differences. Anybody, if you define justice, how would you define justice? There's a legal justice in there. Yeah, we have that. But in God's eyes, what do you think God is getting at in justice? God has a more world view of justice and of them because of their responsibility. Let's see. Oh, by the way, backing up a little bit, has anybody ever tasted wild grapes? I have. Of course, in California, there was grape orchards everywhere where I grew up at and stuff. And yeah, that will, man, you'd spit it right out, when you eat those. So that's how repulsive the people were to God, is what he's getting at there. But Danny?
I don't know if this is weird, but I know Deuteronomy kind of struck me when it was talking about justice and all the judges and all those kind of things, that there was equal measure. It wasn't just about taking down those who did something wrong, bringing them down, and that was justice and punishment. It was also the lifting up of the,
Yeah.
It was called the lifting up of the widow and the orphan, and those are also called justice, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's
That's involved in it. There is legal justice. There is that type thing. I think I saw a good definition. It says it's like we should live upright lives that reflect God's intended order. Let's see, that's not the one I wanted. Let's see. Maybe I didn't write that one down. Let's see, but maybe it's this: we should live upright lives that reflect God's intended order for life. See, God intends for life to be a certain way from his viewpoint. That's the kind of justice he is looking for, his view of justice. Righteousness is the way we live our lives according to his standards. That's what he's looking at, and that reflect the intended order for this life. So righteousness and justice can be synonymous, and what we'll see is when we get into 40 to 66, you'll see a change in what they use righteousness. Righteousness can be equated to salvation a lot of times in there. But yeah, it's interesting how he does use that, God's salvation. And you see this betrayal of the people and stuff like that, but what is amazing about God is this, and what we see in this is one guy said he's scheming to find a way to get back in our hearts. And I think he referred to the book of Ephesians, that we are the temple of the living God, and he wants to live in us. And that just boggles my mind, that the God of this universe wants to inhabit us and be that temple, and he wants us to go out and reflect that. That's our purpose on this earth. That's what we're here for, and that's why we come here and we do this and we see what God wants, and we try to grow in that way. But all right, let's move on here. We're going to be out of time. Now we have a series of 6 woes, and you could we've got 7:50 right today. Okay, so 9 minutes. The series of woes, and does anybody know what the 10th commandment is? The 10th commandment is thou shalt not covet. I know, I looked it up. So, and another word for covetousness is greed. And this defines them, and it defines man now to a T. I want. And it just goes through a number of things here. And when he says woe, that's a interesting thing. It's woe, the word in the Bible, that's not a good word to put there. A better word, it's an old word that's called alas, because there's some nuances to that word. And it's not, it says that the word woe, or the idea is it introduces a lament as much as it does a threat, okay? And it's not merely angry denunciatory, but grief stricken by the sins of his people. So it's like, it's not with joy that he says this, or any, it's like it's sad that he has to say these things. And so what you see, woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field until there's no more room, and you're made to dwell alone in the midst of the land. So I want houses. Were you going to say something, ma'am?
Yeah, I have a version one of the versions that just uses, instead of woe, it says how horrible.
Yeah.
So that fits right with what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny?
It's almost kind of seemed like the opposite of Beatitudes, right? Like it seems
Yeah,
like these
I think of that.
those like persons instead of
Yeah.
that. This is all that negative side of blessings of persons.
It's not exactly blessed are those who join house to house. Yeah, it's the opposite. Very good, very good. And what was the thing about land ownership in those times, buddy?
You couldn't move the marker.
Right, that was one thing.
Because
Mhm.
it was passed down from generation to generation.
Yes.
There was also a whole year in the,
Jubilee
yeah, everything would return.
went back in every 50 years. Yeah.
It's very strict.
Yeah, and they just forgot all about it. They didn't care about that, and they would pressure people to get their lands and stuff. They were very sinful in the way they've been about it. And sometimes people would be poor, and they could sell it, they could make a deal, but they had the opportunity to buy it back. I think there's something in the law about that, and then it would automatically return to them, like Buddy says in the year of Jubilee. But at any rate, greed on that. Then the Lord of hosts has sworn in our hands, surely many houses shall be desolate, and that will be their end. They may gain all these houses and stuff, but they will dwell alone in the midst of the land. And it talks about they're wanting to buy more land. That's another, I want more land. Nobody's ever wanted that. Verse 11, woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they run after strong drink. The greed for just having a good time. I just want to do this. They have liar heart. It's just they want a good time is what it's getting at there. But they do not regard the deeds of the Lord or see the work of his hands. Therefore, my people go into exile for lack of knowledge. And what kind of knowledge is it that they lack?
Knowledge of the Lord.
Knowledge of God. Yes, knowledge of the Lord is what they lack. And so because of that, they go into exile. And that's same with us. Our lack of knowledge is what will hurt us. And that's very important for us to continually be growing in knowledge. That's very important because it's what will keep us from those things. And then it talks about Sheol has enlarged its appetite and opened its mouth beyond measure. And the nobility of Jerusalem and her multitude will go down, and her revelers who exult in her. It's a bad end for people like that. And then he this sums up all this here about man's infatuation with man. Man is humbled, and each one is brought low, and the highs of the haughty are brought low. We've got 5 minutes still. But then there's this passage here that's kind of interesting. Then the lambs are grazed as their pasture. Let's see. But the Lord of hosts is exalted in justice, and the holy God shows himself holy in righteousness. And then the lambs shall graze as a pasture, and the noble shall eat among the rich. There's just a blib in there about hope that he threw in there. This is one of those interchange things. But then it goes back. And I like this verse here. Tell me what you think about this. Woe to those who draw iniquity with cords of falsehood, who draw sin as with carp ropes, who say, let him be quick, let him speed his work, that we may see it. Let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw near. Let it come, that we may know it. That's a very, very bold, arrogant statement. And anybody see anything in that would draw sins of those cart ropes and draw iniquity with cords of falsehood? It's what people do, like draw iniquity. Go ahead, Jeff.
It kind of reminds me of the Jews when Jesus, in his trial and ultimately, when you're the Christ, come down now.
Yeah.
We'll believe you.
Yeah.
Down, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same idea. They were so arrogant and so unbelieving about God, they said, show us, let's see it. You know, they did not believe that it was going to happen, and they sure found out that it was going to happen. But that other part, draw iniquity with cords of falsehood. That's not as big. You sin. But then they just want more and more, and it's what, you know, like ropes of in a cart, pulling the cart, you know. It's like emphasizing the amount of sin that they're willing to commit and things. It's like how far they're willing to go. There's no limit to it. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting verse there that they were so bold about that. And then like today, you know, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Have you seen any examples of that in our day? It's just amazing, yeah. You know, men and men's sports, you know, the whole, our era is filled with a lot of things like that where people call what's very sinful good. And, you know, we see in our highest offices, you know, people commending very sinful behavior. It's no different, you know, different than. Let's see, who put darkness for light, you know, that's just so relevant. Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And then this too, this woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and shrewd in their own sight. You know, there's the idea that like, I work with a guy that he's very intellectual, but he's very, I think, maybe very worldly minded. And he's so intellectual, and he looks at things like, man, I'll be creating life, you know. He thinks like that. I think that's how men get. They don't recognize, you know, they think that man is the greatest of creation. And we see that, you know, like in the climate, global warming and this climate, or the save the earth type thing. You see that same kind of thing where man is the highest and the most knowledgeable. And it's very prevalent in our sight, as it was in their days. They thought they knew something. Okay, 2 minutes here, and it says, like this one here, have you ever heard of something like this? Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and valiant men in mixing strong drink. We watch a show about a rescue in Australia, and it's just amazing how many of those people like this, that they're in trouble because of alcohol and things like that. I don't know. You know, just my opinion is I want to stay away from alcohol. I've experienced that in my life, and the thing I know, that I don't see any good thing ever coming from using alcohol. But that's just my opinion. I'm not, you know, saying that's gospel put on you, but it's a very dangerous thing. Let's see, but it just goes on to talk about how bad they were getting. Therefore, as a tongue of fire devours the stubble, as dry grass sinks down in flaming flames, so their soot will be as rottenness. You know, it's kind of like in California too. In March, everything's all green, and then by the time you get into August, everything is brown and burnt, and fires start. And it's kind of like the idea here. That it may be fun at first, but then this is what's going to happen. It'll be sink down into the flame. All right, so. Okay, we're done with this, and next class we will start and read chapter 6 and 7. And 6, of course, is the 1 to 5. We've seen the problem. How is God going to make this sinful people a righteous people? And then 6 is going to be the answer to that. And so read that and take your notes. And then chapter 7 will begin the trust session of it, where we see this is how not to trust. And I think it's neat the way God bookends these things. 7 through 12 is how not to trust. 36 through 39 is how to trust. And then all between there is a bunch of illustrations of that. So thanks a lot. Hope everybody stayed awake. Appreciate it.